Before we get started, can we just appreciate how Chris Evans in Knives Out this jumper is? I love it. If you've been following me on the internet at all this year, you've probably noticed that I've had a bit of a love affair with Tenet. It's far and away my favourite film of the year, there's no question about that, but I also think it's one of the most ambitious films that I've seen for years. The way that it's pushing what cinema can do, what it can be, how it's challenging us as an audience and how we experience narrative, I find all of that very inspiring. Now, I wasn't planning on making another video about Tenet. I've already made 2 of them. I've made an entire podcast with Mark KERMODE about it. I've made countless Instagram stories spewing my unfiltered thoughts to the internet. I've spoken about it a lot. However, Warner Brothers got in contact with me and said they'd like to partner with me to celebrate the release of Tenet on Blu-ray and DVD and digital and all that good stuff. They're paying me to talk about it more. Oh, you're twisting my arm. I'll do it for you, Warner Brothers. Some people might call this enabling an obsession. I don't know. I just say thank you. And Christmas has come early. It's not like it's an unhealthy obsession, is it? It's not like I've been neglecting my wife and kids for months while I've been creating Tenet theories with string and paper all over the walls. I don't have a wife and kids, so I've got the time to do that. Anyway, they also sent me this glorious Secrets of Tenet coffee table book, which I plan on reading end to end. It's absolutely gorgeous. Oh God, I'm ruining it. I've had a little flip through this already and it's full of incredible pictures and, as you can see, loads of information. Christopher Nolan directing there with his foot. Oh yeah, I've not seen anybody talk about this yet. The fire truck, it says past on the front. This place here where Kat takes her son to school. It's not really a school. I went to go visit the location. Not because I'm obsessed, because I was nearby and I thought, that's a 15-minute walk. Might as well. Ooh. So I'm just reading this now. I'll do this another time. Back to the video. Not only that, but the Blu-ray also comes with over an hour of behind the scenes looking at the making of Tenet, which I obviously watched immediately. As a filmmaker myself, and as somebody who has an ambition to one day hopefully make something on this scale, it was incredible to see the dedication and the creativity and the collaboration of everybody involved, what it takes to make something like this happen. And also seeing the unorthodox way that they pull it together. Like, for example, Ludwig Göransson, who created the score for this, just side note by the way, what an incredible score that this film has. One of the most original, brilliant scores I've heard in a movie like this for a long time. I mean, like blockbuster filmmaking scores. They can get very samey, you know, it's got a very similar vibe, whereas this sounds like nothing I've ever heard before. Traditionally, when you're making music for a movie, the movie will get made, it will be shot and edited, and then the composer will create music to the picture. Makes sense. But with Tenet, Ludwig Göransson made music based on what he read in the script from his conversations with Christopher Nolan. He visited the set. Now that's not a thing that usually happens with composers. I really like that the production process, how they chose to make it, reflects the ideas in the film. So something that's traditionally more linear, one thing happening after the other, is actually, in this case, multiple things happening simultaneously. You know, Tenet. And I'm just so glad that I own this now, because this is a film that lends itself to being rewatched. It rewards you for rewatching it. I think it was built to be rewatched. And my experience changed each time that I watched this film. And I don't just mean my opinion changed, although it did. I mean the film felt different to me every time I've watched it. I've seen it 5 times now. I'm soon to make it 6, 7, 8, 9. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think this film lends itself to being rewatched. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to touch on some spoilers. So if you haven't seen Tenet, get yourself a copy. It's the perfect Christmas present for yourself. I'm sure there's some sort of time travel joke to make about sending it back to yourself, but, you know, figure it out yourself. So this is your last chance. Spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1. Now, actually, before I get started, I just want to say that if your opinion differs from mine, I think that's great. I think the best thing about art is that it creates conversation and different people will have different interpretations based on their experiences and what they bring to it and how they feel and what it makes them think. This is just what Tenet made me think and what it made me feel. And I'm absolutely coming at this from a filmmaker's point of view, so here we go. I don't think the reason why I like Tenet is too different from why I like the more recent Mission Impossible films. It's because they're not shy about what they are. They're functional entertainment films. They're just there to get you from one place to another so we can have some fun action scenes. We can have chases, we can have fights, and we're really going to do it. We're going to use old-fashioned cinematic techniques and really do this stuff for real on camera. Instead of Tom Cruise jumping out of a plane, Christopher Nolan is going to crash a 747 into an airport. He's going to flip a car over and then reverse it. He's going to have his main character fight himself, and we're going to see that from two different perspectives. Everything in it is about creating the best cinematic experience, and I think he's using time inversion. I think he's using time travel language and applying it to filmmaking. So actually everything in the film, like whenever somebody says time or experience the world in a new way, I think what's really going on subtextually is Christopher Nolan is saying we need to think about cinema in a new way. Christopher Nolan has been making movies on a large scale, like blockbuster filmmaking, for the last 15-ish years. And when you've made movies like The Dark Knight and Inception, like Christopher Nolan has, I mean, just try and put yourself in that perspective. Where do you go from there? When you've made movies like that and when you've made that much of an impact, you're not going to be thinking, what story do I want to tell next? What character do I want to meet? Maybe you do. Some people might. But I think what's going on is he's thinking, how do I push the boundaries of what's possible? How do I take the next step? As a director in his position and his height, the power that he has, he could do whatever he wants. And what he's thinking he can do is change the way that movies are made and making bold, original films, taking some chances. And with that in mind, I think that's exactly what Tenet is. It's him going, I'm going to just make the boldest film I possibly can and give it a structure that makes sense in film. I interviewed him a couple of years ago and he even said something like that. I'll play the clip now.
I think that cinema has a very unique ability to manipulate an audience's sense of time.
I think that cinema has a unique ability to manipulate an audience's sense of time. I think that is everything he's interested in one sentence. I think that's what Tenet is. He even says in the behind the scenes on here, the camera literally sees time, which already is amazing. Like, as I'm recording this, it's capturing the moment that it happened, and that moment will never be seen again, but it can be seen over and over again because I pressed record on this thing. That's amazing to me, and I think Nolan thinks about that a lot. It feels like that's what's going on from seeing his movies and from reading what he says and seeing the behind the scenes footage. So let's talk about the protagonist. I mean, first of all, he's called the Protagonist. There's a lot of stuff that's been said about this already, but what a functional, fourth wall breaking, meta cinema way of naming your character. He is functional. He is your protagonist. He is the vehicle for the audience to be taken on this journey, and he knows what we know. And the first time you watch the film, you don't know anything. He doesn't know, we don't know, and we're going to discover what's going on together. He's asking questions that we want to know. He's interested in the answers. He's just as curious and just as confused as we are. That's what happens the first time. But when you watch it again, and again and again and again, you do know what's going on. You understand the world, you understand how time works, you know exactly where it's going, you know who the characters are, you know what the relationships are, you know the backstory, you know the implication, you know the idea of what's going to happen after the film is finished, you know everything. And it feels like the protagonist does too. And I don't really know how to explain this, but there's something in his eyes when you first meet him in that opening shot. He's woken up by the guy who we know is going to eventually torture him. There's like a knowing look in his eye that, like, I know what you're going to do to me. I know exactly who you are. I know exactly where this is going. Even during the opera siege, everything seems to be timed so well. He knows exactly when to run and where to go and when to drop. Even the guys in the audience, he's like, stay, when the gunshots are going off. He's got like an instinct about it. It's almost like he's done it before. And that continues even further after he's in the wind turbines and he goes over to the shipping docks and gets into that car. The slick maneuver of him getting into the car just after the driver has got out feels like traditional spy stuff. But actually, now it feels more like Groundhog Day. Like he knows exactly what beat everything's going to happen on. It almost feels like it's mundane to him. He's just going through the motions a little bit. There's nothing cool or slick about it. He's just like, and I'm in. Now, obviously, this theory doesn't carry throughout the entire film. There are moments when it feels like he does know what's going on and moments when he feels like he doesn't know what's going on. I don't really have an answer for that. I think it's purposefully abstract. Now, where I'm going with all this is that large scale, I think the film is like big Groundhog Day. I think what we're seeing is a time loop, but not in the traditional way that it really is time travel. I don't think any of that stuff really matters. I think it's all meta cinema. I think it's about characters who are trapped in the narrative of a film. They are forced to relive this over and over again. The opening line of the whole film is "Wake up the Americans." The first thing that happens is that your protagonist wakes up. And this is explored a little bit in the behind the scenes. There's this whole thing about experiencing reality the way you're presented it. The only reason we think that that's the beginning of the film is because we're told that's the start of the film. There's your protagonist. This is when you're meeting him for the first time. This is the start. But actually, the start and the end are on the same day. They're happening at the same time. They're all those events are happening simultaneously. The opera siege, the battle at the end, the boat in Vietnam. I think that's it. Are those all the things that are happening simultaneously? There's a lot of things happening simultaneously. So all of that is happening on the same day. And yes, the protagonist needs to go through all those events in order to get back to that again. He's on one timeline. There's also a moment, I think it's one of the most important lines in the whole film, when Neil says, in a parallel worlds theory, we can't know the relationship between consciousness and multiple realities. And I think there's a way of arguing that the multiple realities are to do with when we decide to play the film. How do we know that the protagonist at the start of the film doesn't know everything that we know? I don't think that question can be answered, but there's something about the way that he behaves in that opening scene that makes me feel like he kind of knows what's going on, even if it's just an instinct. So then the moment when he takes that cyanide pill, that makes me think of moments that Nolan has done in previous films like The Prestige and Inception, the leap of faith. There's something about taking that pill where he knows he's not going to die, but it's all going to start again. That's just how James Bond adventures work anyway. We put that movie on and wake up that protagonist, and on an adventure he goes, and he doesn't seem to remember an adventure he'd been on before. He has no sense of continuity for his life, and that feels like what the protagonist is. He's this functional vessel for us to go on a cinematic adventure, to globetrot, to be a spy, to time travel. And that brings me to my big idea, and I think there's a few things like this being thrown around on the internet already. If you took the opening scene, the opera, and moved it to the end, it would start with the character literally waking up, and the film would end with him taking the cyanide capsule and dying, knowing that he's going to have to take that leap of faith, understanding the idea that hopefully he's going to wake up and it's all going to start again. Because I always thought there was something strange. I even ended my last spoiler talk video talking about how it was strange to me in the language of Christopher Nolan films that the title was after an opening sequence, because Nolan quite traditionally, apart from a couple of others, puts the title of his films at the very end. So it felt strange to me that it came where it did, especially after an opening sequence. So my interpretation of that is that Nolan has made a loop film, but has intentionally started us in a peculiar place to throw us off the scent, to disorientate us. It would be too obvious to start a film with somebody waking up saying, "Welcome to the afterlife," and then end a film with him taking a cyanide capsule and dying. That would be too obvious. It would be like, oh yeah, that just connects. But because he started it in a strange place, it immediately throws you off the scent. The reason why I think the parallel worlds theory line is so important is because I think we, as the audience, act kind of like gods, and we decide when those parallel worlds begin by watching the film. Every time we play it, it starts a new reality for these characters, and they have to live it out again and again and again. I was talking to a friend about this recently, and the only term I could come up with was meta-cinema, or breaking the fourth wall, or saying things like, it's aware that it's a film. And they said, so it's autotelic. And I was like, what does that mean? And the definition of it is having an end or purpose in itself. And I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what it is. I think it's an autotelic film. The sole reason why Tenet exists is to be a film, just to be an adventure, to be cinema. And all the things within it are based in reality and based in real scientific theories, but they're only jumping off points for us to go on a cinematic adventure. That's the point of it. Christopher Nolan, I think, wanted to make a movie to make a movie, to like push the boundaries of cinema, to see what was possible. And he had to come up with a reason to do all these things. But really the only purpose was to try and make a really great cinematic experience. I don't think there's any real conclusion to this. I think what I'm really excited about is the fact that it's now available. People are going to start really delving into the specifics of the filmmaking, because when it's in the cinema you can't pause it and rewind it yourself, but we can now. And the first thing it makes me think of is the opening scene in the opera. If you were to reverse those events, the protagonist is the person who plants the bombs. That's just interesting. It's just an interesting story when you reverse it, isn't it? And that's what I loved about the behind the scenes as well. Christopher Nolan said he directed the fight scene where the protagonist fights himself twice. He directed it 2 times because he understands that the perspective needed to shift. You needed to understand who you were rooting for. The other one becomes the villain of the scene. I could talk about this forever, and I probably will. I think it's going to be a movie that stands the test of time. You don't need a reminder, but it's out now on Blu-ray and DVD and digital and all that good stuff, as well as the coffee table book. Thank you so much for listening to my ramblings. I'll leave all social media links in the description. Give it a like if you liked it, because if you liked it, that just makes sense. And until next time, get the hell out of my room.